at the Manning Conference with Defense Minister Jason Kenney, Minister of Multiculturalism as well, Minister of Immigration before that, Employment. You're becoming the Minister of everything these days.
So it seems.
So it seems. So it's only been a couple of weeks that you've been in the Defense Ministry job. This is a big file to get to learn. I've been following you on social media. You're putting up a lot of photos of your tours of different bases. How big a learning curve is it, and how cool is it to be in some of those planes and helicopters and stuff?
It's a great privilege. I have to tell you, Brian, when the Prime Minister asked me to do this job, my first thought was what a privilege this was, because I've had members of my family involved in the military in the defense of the Crown of North America since the American Revolutionary War, which we lost. We were on the right side of that, with apologies to my American friends. The War of 1812, Crimea, the Boer War, First and Second World Wars, the Fenian raids, on the right side of, on the Crown side of that. And my dad was a fighter pilot during the Cold War. In fact, I was out at his home base, CFB Comox in Vancouver Island, last weekend. So I have this kind of innate sense about the...
So you got a long history. You don't have a personal one, but you have a long family history.
I'm not in the military myself, but I was kind of born into this idea of the nobility of the profession of arms. And I just have the greatest respect for all of our men and women, our sailors, airmen, and soldiers. But let me tell you, I am so impressed just in my first 3 weeks visiting a bunch of bases, all three services, to see how high morale is, how delighted our military personnel are with the new equipment they have, the new kit, the new C-17 Globemaster strategic airlift capability out of Trenton. We're getting them a fifth one later this month. The C-17 Hercules J-Series tactical airlifts that help us to spread Canada all around the world. The new modernized Halifax-class frigates. I was on board the HMCS Calgary in Esquimalt last week. The fully operational and retrofitted submarine fleet that we now have. It's finally there, but it's there. You know what? It was a painful process, but we've got subs under the water as a key strategic element of our Navy, and so on. Amazing new equipment for the Army, for the military, for the infantry, I should say. And so, yeah, there are challenges in our military, but I'll tell you, they have some of the most modern kit and capabilities that they've had in decades.
All right, so you take over this role at a time when Canada is at war. That obviously has to be a steep learning curve as well, coming up to speed on the file, a very sensitive file. Today we heard up on Parliament Hill with RCMP Commissioner Bob Paulson, we heard the video. We saw the video, heard the words of Michael Zehef-Bibeau. I want to ask you about that. Have you had a chance to hear what he said or been briefed on that, saying that it's due to Canada's involvement in these wars that he shot Corporal Cirillo within sight of where we're standing now and then went up on Parliament Hill?
Well, listen, I'm not at all surprised. I think it was obvious to any sensible person that the two terrorist attacks in October were at least motivated by the call to violence of the so-called Islamic State, ISIL, which has explicitly targeted Canada on several occasions, calling on people to commit terror attacks against this country. But, Brian, it's important to understand that ISIL, in Arabic called Daesh, is just one manifestation of a broader phenomena that is spread all the way from West Africa, with Boko Haram in Nigeria raping and pillaging its way through communities, kidnapping hundreds of girls and confining them to sexual slavery, bombing dozens of churches, murdering thousands, through Al-Shabaab in Somalia, through all of those jihadist organizations in the Middle East, including ISIL, all the way down through Pakistan, Afghanistan, down to the Philippines and Indonesia. This is an arc of violence, all of it unified by a common dystopian vision of creating a so-called caliphate based on a violent application of a 7th century version of Sharia law. It's hard for many of us in the democratic modern West to get our heads around this, because it seems like if somebody wrote a Hollywood plot around this, it would be rejected for its implausibility. That's how irrational this ideology is, but it's motivating people, and all it takes is a few people with evil intent to the equipment, and they can create lethal violence here at home, which is why we cannot, we don't want to overreact to that threat, but nor should we be naive as though it does not exist.
All right, C-51's not your file, so I'm not going to ask you about that, but I will ask you about how far Canada can spread itself. I think that joining the fight against ISIL with the bombing after watching them, displace the largest Christian city in Iraq that had been there for more than a millennia, watching them displace the Yazidis and other minority groups. We couldn't stand back and say, no, we won't help on that. Not if you actually take Never Again seriously. Yeah. But all those groups you listed, all those places, we can't be involved in all of those. So what is the response?
Well, look, you're right. We're not a superpower, and even if we were, we couldn't be everywhere all the time.
And the Americans can't either.
Precisely, and there are limits to our capabilities. Having said that, we do have a role. We have an historic role. We have a role as a champion of human dignity, of the rule of law, of freedom and democratic principles, to join with allies in confronting some of the worst manifestations of this, to use the Prime Minister's phrase, this jihadist threat that has declared war on Canada. That's what we are doing in Iraq. That's why we have special operations forces, some of the best in the world, training the brave Kurdish Peshmerga militias in northern Iraq to defend themselves. Hundreds of thousands of those Yazidis and Iraqi Christians, other minority community members fled behind Kurdish lines to escape genocide by Daesh, by the so-called Islamic State, and all that stands really between them and mass death is the Kurdish Peshmerga with their Kalashnikovs and light arms. So what we're doing is transferring to them some of the tremendous tactical knowledge that our special ops guys obtained in Afghanistan about how to fight an enemy like this. Similarly, we have the Royal Canadian Air Force, 6 RCAF Hornets that are engaged in tactical bombing missions against ISIL targets in Iraq, and this has made a difference. We are one of the only countries with an Air Force there that has precision-guided munitions. And so when we decide on a target, let's say an IED factory where the ISIL is creating improvised explosive devices, we can get right in there with our precision munitions and ensure that there are no civilian casualties around in the area. So our contribution is meaningful. It is saving lives. It has contained ISIL. It's stopped its growth, its gaining of territory. It's put them back on the defensive. It's eliminated their ability to make large-scale troop movements. It's eliminated a lot of their key infrastructure. They're moving a lot of their artillery and heavy armor back into Syria now because they were so exposed to the bombing operations in Iraq. So we believe we're accomplishing our objective and creating the strategic conditions for the Iraqi army to launch a ground counteroffensive at some point.
All right. I'll end with this. You said jihadist in our conversation. I think that's pretty clear what we're dealing with. But some people, chattering classes, whether it's other political parties or in the media, are afraid of that word. Why do you use it, and why do you think others are afraid of it?
I can't ascribe motives to others. All I know is that we have to, you can't deal with a security threat or any other kind of threat unless you have an accurate diagnosis. And I think we should take these people at their own word. They believe in something they call the doctrine of armed jihad. It's a particular ideology. It's a distortion, I believe, of a religion. It's a particularly pernicious and violent distortion. But to pretend that there is not some, that this ideology is not rooted in a distortion of a certain theology is to ignore reality. We have to face reality, and the reality is that the vast majority of victims of these jihadists, by the way, are Muslims, honest, law-abiding, peaceful Muslims who just want to get along, raising good families, and who are being targeted for this kind. So we stand with them in solidarity with the Shia of Syria being massacred by this group, by the innocent Sunnis who refuse to succumb to this dystopian vision of ISIL's caliphate. It doesn't do them any favors to pretend it is other than what it is. This is a particular ideology. It unites this whole movement from Boko Haram in Nigeria to the Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists in southern Philippines, in Mindanao. We have to understand what that is in order to combat it, and that's what we're seeking to do.
All right, Minister Kenney, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brad.